Listen closely, my friends. There is a fear controlling your life right now, but you may not even recognize it. For some people, it is the fear of losing someone they love. For others, it is the fear of failing after everyone expects them to succeed, being rejected when they finally reveal who they are, being judged when they speak their mind, or facing a future they cannot predict. And the strangest part is this: you may think you are afraid of what could happen, when in reality you are afraid of not being able to control what happens. That's where the Stoics discovered something most people never understand. Marcus Aurelius faced war, betrayal, political pressure, loss, and uncertainty, yet he trained his mind not to demand a safe life, but to become strong enough for an uncertain one, because fear becomes powerful only when you believe you must control the outcome. Once you understand what belongs to you and what never did, something inside you begins to change. You cannot control whether someone leaves you. You cannot control whether people approve of you. You cannot guarantee success, prevent every loss, or know what tomorrow will bring. But you can control the mind that meets those things. Epictetus built his philosophy around this distinction. Some things are within our control, and some are not. The person who truly understands this stops wasting his strength fighting reality, and starts using that strength to master himself. Think about it. How many decisions in your life were made because you genuinely wanted something? And how many were made because you were afraid? Afraid of looking stupid, afraid of being alone, afraid of losing money, afraid of disappointing someone, afraid that if you fail once, it will prove something about who you are. Fear doesn't always tell you to run. Sometimes it tells you to stay exactly where you are. Seneca understood that adversity should not be something that destroys your confidence when it arrives. It should be something your mind has already learned to face. This is why Stoicism is not about pretending that fear doesn't exist. It is about becoming the kind of person who can feel fear without obeying it. You don't become fearless when fear disappears. You become fearless when fear loses its authority over your decisions. In this video, you will discover 10 powerful Stoic principles that attack fear from its deepest roots: fear of loss, rejection, failure, uncertainty, judgment, discomfort, and the future itself. These aren't empty motivational statements. They are principles drawn from Stoic philosophy and shaped into practical ways to train your mind, strengthen your character, and remain steady when life refuses to go according to your plan. And stay until the final principle, because the last one changes the entire way you look at fear. It reveals why the person who has accepted that life cannot be completely controlled becomes incredibly difficult to intimidate. Once you understand it, you won't spend your life trying to build a world where nothing can hurt you. You'll build a mind that knows it can face whatever comes. Principle 1. The fear of losing control. Most fear begins with a simple demand. I need this situation to go the way I want. You want people to stay, plans to succeed, opportunities to work, and the future to unfold exactly as you imagined. But the moment reality refuses to cooperate, your mind starts creating fear. The Stoics understood that this was a losing battle from the beginning, because life was never designed to obey your expectations. Epictetus gave this idea extraordinary power when he taught that some things are within our control and some things are not. Your choices, judgments, effort, and response belong to you. Other people's opinions, their decisions, unexpected events, and the final outcome do not. Fear grows when you try to command what was never yours to command. Freedom begins when you stop demanding control over the uncontrollable. Imagine you are walking into an important interview. Your mind starts racing. What if they reject me? What if I fail? What if they think I'm not good enough? Notice what happened. You haven't even entered the room, yet your mind is already suffering through an event that hasn't happened. The Stoic changes the question. What is my responsibility right now? Prepare well. Speak honestly. Give your best effort. Then release the outcome. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that external events could not determine the quality of his character. That is the real secret. You don't need certainty to be calm. You need clarity about what belongs to you. When you stop measuring your peace by outcomes you cannot guarantee, fear begins losing its foundation. You may not control what happens next, but you can always control who you become when it happens. So the next time fear appears, don't immediately ask, how do I make this situation safe? Ask a stronger question. What part of this is actually mine to control? Then give your full strength to that part and release the rest without resentment. Because the moment you stop trying to control the world, you take back control of the one thing that matters most, your mind. Principle 2. The fear you feed becomes the fear that owns you. Fear rarely arrives as a command. It arrives as a thought that sounds reasonable. What if it goes wrong? What if they leave? What if I fail? What if everyone sees me differently? Then you replay that thought until your imagination turns a possibility into a certainty. The Stoics understood this dangerous habit. The mind can suffer from an event long before reality ever gives it a reason to suffer. Seneca understood this deeply when he warned that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that. You can lose an entire night worrying about a conversation that hasn't happened, destroy your confidence over a failure that hasn't occurred, or feel rejected by someone who hasn't even rejected you. Your body reacts to the story your mind is creating. The danger may be imaginary, but the fear feels completely real. This is where Stoic discipline becomes powerful. When fear appears, don't immediately believe it. Examine it. Ask yourself, is this happening right now? Or am I suffering from something I only imagine might happen? That single question creates distance between you and the thought. You stop being the prisoner of the fear and become the observer of it. And once you can observe a thought without obeying it, that thought begins to lose its authority. Imagine you have to speak in front of hundreds of people. Your mind says, I'm going to embarrass myself. The ordinary person accepts the prediction and becomes more nervous. The Stoic challenges it. Maybe I will make a mistake. Maybe someone won't like my performance. So what? I can still speak, learn, and continue. Notice what just happened. You didn't eliminate uncertainty. You eliminated your need for certainty. That is a much deeper form of courage. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly trained himself to see events without adding unnecessary judgment to them. The event itself was one thing. The story his mind created about the event was another. That distinction can change your entire relationship with fear. Someone's silence doesn't automatically mean rejection. Failure doesn't automatically mean you're worthless. Uncertainty doesn't automatically mean danger. Your first interpretation is not always the truth. So when fear speaks, don't fight it desperately and don't surrender to it blindly. Sit with it, question it. Strip away the exaggeration, the prediction, and the catastrophe your mind has created. Then deal only with what is actually in front of you. Fear becomes weaker when you stop feeding it with imagination. And the more often you practice this, the more your mind learns a powerful lesson. Not every frightening thought deserves to become a frightening reality. Principle 3. Make peace with what you cannot keep. One of the deepest sources of fear is not what might happen to you, but what you might lose. You fear losing people, status, money, opportunities, youth, health, or the version of life you worked so hard to build. And because you desperately want to keep these things, your mind becomes terrified of the possibility that they could disappear. The Stoics attacked this fear at its root. Anything outside your character was never completely yours to possess. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that everything external is temporary. People change, circumstances change, possessions disappear, and even our own bodies eventually return to nature. This wasn't pessimism, it was preparation. When you understand that nothing external comes with a permanent guarantee, you stop living in constant anxiety over protecting what cannot be permanently protected. You begin appreciating what you have without becoming a prisoner of the fear of losing it. Imagine someone you deeply love. Instead of enjoying their presence, you constantly worry about losing them. You check their messages, seek reassurance, become possessive, and imagine every possible scenario in which they leave. You think you're protecting the relationship, but you're actually allowing fear to poison the very thing you wanted to protect. The Stoic approach is different. Love deeply, appreciate fully, but never demand permanence from something that life never promised would last forever. This is where the ancient Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum becomes powerful. The Stoics would mentally consider possible losses, not to become depressed, but to become prepared. Imagine losing the comfort you currently take for granted. Imagine the opportunity disappearing. Imagine the person no longer being beside you. Then return to the present and realize something extraordinary. You still have this moment. Fear loses some of its power when you stop pretending that impermanence is an injustice. Seneca understood that we suffer when we become attached to possessions as though they belong to us forever. But the Stoic learns to hold external things with an open hand. If they remain, be grateful. If they leave, grieve honestly, but don't let their departure destroy your identity. Your character must be the one possession you refuse to lose. Everything else can change without taking away the person you have chosen to become. So the next time fear whispers, "What if I lose this?" don't immediately try to silence the thought. Ask a deeper question. If I lost it, would I still be able to stand? If the answer is yes, you've discovered something powerful. You don't need a life where nothing is ever taken from you. You need a mind strong enough to remain standing when something is. That is the beginning of true fearlessness. Principle 4. Walk directly toward what frightens you. Fear becomes stronger every time you run from it. Avoid the difficult conversation, and your mind learns that the conversation was dangerous. Refuse the opportunity because you might fail, and failure becomes larger in your imagination. Stay silent because someone might judge you, and eventually you become afraid of your own voice. The Stoics understood that avoidance does not destroy fear. It trains fear to become your master. Epictetus taught that we should not expect life to remove everything uncomfortable from our path. Instead, we should train ourselves to meet difficulty with reason and courage. This is why Stoic courage is different from reckless bravery. The Stoic does not run toward danger simply to prove he is fearless. He deliberately stops allowing discomfort to make his decisions. He teaches his mind, "You may feel fear, but you do not get to choose for me." Imagine you have been avoiding something for months because you are afraid of failing. Every time you postpone it, you feel temporary relief. But that relief comes with a hidden price. Your brain learns that avoidance is safety. Tomorrow becomes easier to avoid, and the fear becomes bigger. The Stoic reverses the pattern. He takes one controlled step toward the thing he fears, not because he knows he will succeed, but because he refuses to let uncertainty dictate his life. Marcus Aurelius faced circumstances he could not simply escape: war, political conflict, personal loss, and constant uncertainty. Yet his philosophy was not built around waiting for life to become comfortable. He repeatedly returned to duty, reason, and action. That is the mindset you need when fear appears. Don't ask, "How can I make this feel easy?" Ask, "What is the courageous action required of me right now?" Start small. Make the call you've been avoiding. Speak the truth you've been hiding. Apply for the opportunity you think you're not ready for. Walk into the room even when your confidence is shaking. Each time you act despite fear, you collect evidence that fear does not control you. Courage is not built by thinking about courage. It is built through repeated encounters with the things you once avoided, and eventually something changes. The same situation that once made your heart race no longer has the same authority over you. Not because the world became safer, but because you became stronger. Fear may still knock on the door, but now you know something it doesn't. You don't have to open it. Principle 5. Stop asking fear for permission. Fear becomes dangerous when you start negotiating with it. You tell yourself, "I'll begin when I'm more confident. I'll speak when I know exactly what to say. I'll take the risk when I know it will work." But that perfect moment never arrives. Fear keeps moving the finish line, giving you another reason to wait. The Stoic understands that confidence is not the requirement for action. It is often the result of action. Epictetus taught that circumstances do not determine our character, our judgments and responses do. This means you don't need to feel fearless before doing something difficult. You need to decide what is right, then act according to that decision. Your emotions can come along for the journey, but they don't get to hold the steering wheel. Fear can speak, but it cannot make the final decision. Think about the person who wants to change his life, but keeps waiting until he feels ready. He wants to start the business, change his habits, speak honestly, leave the wrong environment, or pursue something meaningful. But every time he gets close, fear gives him another question. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if it doesn't work? If he keeps answering every question, he will spend his entire life preparing to live instead of actually living. The Stoics would bring him back to one thing: duty. What is the right action in front of you? Not the easiest action, not the action that guarantees success, the action that aligns with your values. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to focus on the work directly in front of him rather than becoming consumed by everything that might happen afterward. That is how you cut through fear, by shrinking the enormous future into one courageous action today. And here's where the transformation begins. Every time you act without waiting for certainty, you teach your mind something new. I can move forward without guarantees. You don't need to know how the entire story ends. You only need enough courage to write the next sentence. Fear wants certainty before action. Courage accepts uncertainty and acts anyway. So when fear tells you to wait, don't ask, "How can I become completely fearless?" Ask, "What would I do right now if fear wasn't making the decision?" Then take that step, because eventually you discover the secret fear never wanted you to learn. You were never waiting for confidence. You were waiting for permission, and you don't need it anymore. Principle 6. Take away fear's worst-case power. Fear becomes enormous when your mind treats the worst possible outcome as something you could never survive. You imagine losing the opportunity, being rejected, failing publicly, losing money, or watching everything you built collapse, and your mind immediately concludes, if that happens, I'm finished. The Stoics challenged that conclusion. They trained themselves to look directly at the worst possibility and ask a more powerful question. If it happens, can I still remain standing? This is where Seneca's Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum becomes incredibly powerful. Instead of constantly assuming everything will go well, the Stoic occasionally imagines that it won't. Not to become negative, but to remove the shock. When you mentally confront a possibility before reality forces you to face it, the unknown becomes less terrifying. What you have already learned to face in your mind cannot intimidate you in quite the same way when it finally arrives. Imagine you're terrified of losing your job. Your mind tells you, if I lose this, my life is over. Instead of running from that thought, examine it. You might lose the job. It would hurt. You might struggle for a while, but would you stop breathing? Would your intelligence disappear? Would your ability to rebuild vanish? No. You would still have your judgment, your skills, your character, and the ability to take the next step. The event could wound you without having the power to define you. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of the temporary nature of wealth, status, reputation, and even life itself. He wasn't trying to become emotionally numb. He was making his mind independent from things that could disappear. When you understand this, fear changes its language. Instead of saying, I cannot survive this, your mind begins saying, this may be painful, but I can meet it. That difference is enormous. This doesn't mean you should expect disaster or live pessimistically. It means you stop building your emotional stability on the assumption that nothing will ever go wrong. Life will eventually disappoint you. Someone will leave. A plan will fail. An opportunity will disappear. You will lose something you wanted to keep. The goal is not to build a life where nothing is lost. The goal is to build a character that cannot be completely lost with it. So when fear shows you its worst possible future, don't immediately look away. Look directly at it and ask, if this really happened, what part of me would still remain? Then protect that part. Your reason, your values, your courage, your ability to act. Because once you realize that even your worst day cannot take away your ability to choose your next move, fear loses the power to threaten you with total destruction. Principle 7. Become immune to the judgment of others. One of the most powerful forms of fear is the fear of being seen differently. You rehearse your words before speaking because someone might disagree. You hide your ambitions because people might laugh. You tolerate situations you hate because you are afraid of what others will say if you walk away. Slowly, without realizing it, you stop living according to your values and start performing for an audience that may not even be thinking about you. Epictetus understood this trap perfectly. You cannot control another person's judgment of you, but you can control whether you surrender your peace to it. Think about how much energy disappears into questions like, what will they think? Will they approve? What if they criticize me? The Stoic doesn't waste his life trying to control an audience. He asks a much harder question, do I respect the person I am becoming? Imagine you finally decide to pursue something meaningful. The moment you tell someone, they laugh. Someone says you're unrealistic. Another person tells you that you'll fail. Suddenly your confidence begins collapsing, not because anything about your goal changed, but because someone else's opinion entered your mind and started acting like a verdict. That is the moment you have to remember. An opinion is not a command. Marcus Aurelius lived under constant public scrutiny. yet he repeatedly returned his attention to virtue rather than reputation. He understood that praise and criticism are both forms of external noise. If praise can make you arrogant, criticism can make you insecure. In both cases, someone else has gained access to your inner world. Freedom begins when neither applause nor rejection can decide who you are. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or refusing all criticism. A Stoic listens carefully when criticism contains truth and discards it when it contains nothing useful. That's the difference between wisdom and insecurity. You don't need everyone to approve of you. You need enough self-awareness to recognize when correction can make you better, and enough inner strength to ignore opinions that were never meant to guide your life. So the next time someone judges you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is there truth here that can improve me, or is this simply noise I don't need to carry? If there is truth, learn from it. If there is only noise, leave it where you found it. Because the moment you stop needing everyone to understand you, approve of you, or agree with you, you become dangerously free. Principle 8. Train your mind to stand alone. One of the deepest fears people carry is the fear of being alone. Not simply having no one around, but losing the approval, protection, attention, or presence they have secretly built their identity around. You become afraid to leave the wrong relationship, afraid to say no, afraid to disagree, and afraid to walk away because somewhere inside you believe, if they leave me, I won't be okay. The Stoic destroys that dependency by learning to become internally complete. Seneca repeatedly emphasized the value of being comfortable with yourself and not making your peace dependent on constant company or external comfort. This does not mean rejecting people or becoming cold. It means understanding the difference between loving someone's presence and needing their presence to feel whole. When another person's presence becomes necessary for your identity, fear enters the relationship and starts controlling your decisions. Think about someone who stays in a situation that destroys their peace simply because they are terrified of being alone. They know the relationship is unhealthy. They know the environment is wrong. They know they have outgrown the people around them, yet they remain, not because they are happy, but because solitude frightens them more than suffering. That is not connection. That is dependence disguised as love. The Stoics practiced periods of simplicity and solitude because they understood something modern life often hides. If you cannot sit peacefully with yourself, you will eventually accept almost anything just to avoid being alone. Marcus Aurelius constantly turned inward, reminding himself that the mind could become its own refuge. When your inner world becomes strong enough, loneliness stops feeling like abandonment and starts becoming space for clarity. This is where real freedom begins. You can love people without possessing them. You can appreciate relationships without being terrified of their ending. You can walk away from what destroys your character without believing that your life has ended. And you can stand alone without feeling incomplete. The goal isn't to need nobody. The goal is to know that you can survive without anyone controlling your peace. So practice being alone without immediately reaching for distraction. Sit with your thoughts. Walk without your phone. Spend time without needing someone's approval or attention. Learn your own mind, because the person who can stand peacefully alone becomes incredibly difficult to manipulate through the threat of abandonment. When you no longer fear being alone, you stop being afraid to choose what is right. Principle 9. Make uncertainty your training ground. Most people don't fear the future itself. They fear entering a future they cannot predict. They want guarantees before they act, certainty before they commit, and proof that everything will work before they take the first step. But life never gives those guarantees. The Stoic becomes fearless by accepting what most people spend their lives resisting. Uncertainty is not a problem to eliminate. It is the environment in which strength is built. Marcus Aurelius lived with uncertainty every day. He could plan a campaign, make a decision, prepare his soldiers, and still have no guarantee about what tomorrow would bring. Yet he didn't make certainty a requirement for peace. He focused on what the present demanded from him. That is the difference between a fragile mind and a trained mind. One needs to know what happens next, while the other trusts itself to handle whatever happens next. Think about how often you delay your life because you don't know the outcome. You don't start because you might fail. You don't speak because you might be rejected. You don't change because you don't know whether the next chapter will be better. But notice the trap. You're asking the future to give you confidence before you're willing to move toward it. The Stoic reverses the equation. He moves first, adapts second, and lets reality reveal the next step. Epictetus understood that your power doesn't come from predicting every event. It comes from knowing that when an event arrives, you still have the ability to choose your response. You may not know whether the door will open, but you can knock. You may not know whether the plan will succeed, but you can execute it with discipline. You may not know whether tomorrow will be difficult, but you can decide today what kind of person will face it. This is where uncertainty stops being your enemy. Every unknown situation becomes another opportunity to practice judgment, patience, courage, and adaptability. You stop saying, "I need to know everything will be okay." Instead, you begin saying, "Whatever happens, I will deal with it." That sentence is far more powerful than any guarantee the future could ever give you. So when uncertainty makes you afraid, don't demand an answer from tomorrow. Return to today. Ask what is required of you right now, then do that with everything you have. Because fear wants a map of the entire road before you take the first step. Stoicism teaches you something stronger. You don't need to know the entire path when you trust yourself to handle the next step. Principle 10. Become the person fear cannot betray. There comes a point where you stop trying to remove fear from your life and start removing its authority over you. You realize that fear has been asking the same question all along. What if something happens that you cannot handle? The Stoic answer is not, "Nothing bad will happen." It is far more powerful. Whatever happens, I will meet it with reason, courage, and character. Marcus Aurelius understood that the world could take away comfort, status, possessions, and even the people he loved. But there was one thing he continued to defend: the quality of his own mind. That is the final transformation of Stoicism. Your confidence no longer comes from believing that life will protect you. It comes from knowing that you will not abandon yourself when life becomes difficult. Think about how different your decisions become when you stop needing guarantees. You can enter the room without knowing whether they will approve. You can begin without knowing whether you will succeed. You can love without demanding that someone stay forever. You can lose something without believing you have lost yourself. The world remains uncertain, but your response becomes certain. Epictetus teaches us that circumstances do not have to dictate our character. Seneca reminds us to prepare the mind for adversity. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returns to duty, reason, and the present moment. These teachings point toward the same final truth. Fear loses its power when your values become stronger than your desire for comfort. You stop asking, "How can I avoid suffering?" and start asking, "How can I remain honorable if suffering comes?" That is what it truly means to become fearless. Not becoming reckless. Not pretending that pain doesn't hurt. Not walking through life believing nothing can go wrong. Fearlessness is knowing that something can go wrong and still choosing to move forward. You don't need a world without uncertainty. You need a mind that doesn't collapse because uncertainty exists. So when fear comes back, and it will, remember everything you have trained. Control what belongs to you. Question the stories your mind creates. Accept impermanence. Walk toward discomfort. Ignore empty judgment. Stand firmly on your own. Face uncertainty without demanding guarantees. And above everything else, protect your character. Because the ultimate Stoic secret is simple. You become fearless when you finally realize that whatever life takes from you, it cannot take away your ability to choose who you become next. After these 10 principles, understand one final truth. You were never meant to build a life where nothing scares you. You were meant to build a mind that remains steady even when life becomes uncertain. You cannot control who stays, who leaves, what happens tomorrow, or how the world responds to you. But you can control the person standing in the middle of it all. Marcus Aurelius did not become powerful because life was gentle with him. He became powerful because he refused to let difficult circumstances dictate the quality of his character. Epictetus taught inner freedom even when his outer circumstances were far from free. Seneca understood that adversity becomes less terrifying when the mind has already learned how to face it. They didn't escape fear, they trained themselves to stop obeying it. So when fear tells you, "What if you fail?" remember that failure cannot decide your worth. When it says, "What if they leave?" remember that losing someone does not mean losing yourself. When it says, "What if everything changes?" remember that your character can remain steady even when everything around you moves. The world may be unpredictable, but your response doesn't have to be. From today forward, don't ask life to become safer before you become brave. Don't wait for certainty before you act. Don't wait for confidence before you move. Move and let confidence follow. Face discomfort. Accept uncertainty. Release what you cannot control. Protect your values. And every time fear appears, remind yourself, "I have faced difficult moments before, and I am still here." Because true Stoic fearlessness is not a loud declaration that I fear nothing. It is the quiet certainty that, whatever comes, I will face it. And when you reach that point, fear can still knock on your mind's door, but it no longer owns the house. Have no fear, not because life cannot hurt you, but because you finally know that whatever happens, you will not abandon yourself.